Hi everyone and welcome back to Switch Up. Today we're going to go over the latest patch to LEGO Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, specifically on the Nintendo Switch, looking at performance. Although I absolutely love the game in my initial review, there were some serious performance issues. These were more noticeable on some planets than others, and now that for some weird reason we don't get any patch notes with these releases, there's very little information for people to find out exactly how it's running. How is the Skywalker Saga now, and has it been all patched up? Well, let's find out. Okay, first up then, let's look at the performance. So when we look back at the initial review, we can see that when you split the screen, performance was often even worse than that. Interestingly, the developers had moved away from Unreal Engine, some say because of costs, but they moved to their proprietary engine before potentially their staff were quite used to it. This meant that things that were previously quite easy to do were now much more tricky. Some areas of performance originally were fine. Things like the space-based battles, they ran well, generally 30 frames per second, and as we'll go into when we get to the visuals section and the overall visual quality, it looked alright, but some sacrifices have had to be made to get things running. Now, frame rates on the updated version are much improved, significantly better than they were when I first played the game. You're looking at a locked out 30 frames per second, but not only that, it's the frame pacing. That's the amount of time it takes for each frame to be delivered to the screen. This is noticeably smoother, particularly again when you're playing in single player. As we move from planet to planet, the 30 frames per second is maintained almost 95% of the time. Previously, this would stutter and drop down, and issues with frame pacing meant that you'd get some slight camera jitter. You may wonder how they've actually achieved this, and that's through a number of different methods, which we'll talk about. But first, let's look at the frame rate when you're playing with split screen. Now, in my experience before, I got this down to 15 frames per second at times, which is not quite a slideshow, but it's close. And now we're much closer to the 30 FPS. It's almost like they're limiting this. It locked out for me at one point at 28 frames per second and just stayed there. And then in another area it jumped up to 30. Perhaps they're just trying to make it more consistent rather than it jumping between the two. Still, again, much improved over the original release, which is really nice for Switch players to see. We don't tend to get all the fancy bells and whistles, so just clinging on to baseline performance standards is often what we're looking for. So in terms of performance then, it's a huge improvement. Annoyingly, I didn't measure the load times of the game initially, and as such I can't really definitively say whether it's improved, but what I did notice, there's a little spaceship game that you can play in between loading, and the frame rate of that is now much lower. What that suggests to me is they're putting less resources into that and more into actually loading the levels, and it felt, maybe placebo, that the load times were improved. It would make sense to me, because as nice as it is to have that game, I'd rather be playing the actual game. Which takes us then onto image quality, and this is where I think the developers have had to tweak certain aspects to try and get that performance working right. Now, first and foremost, we have quite heavy dynamic resolution scaling. What this means is that regardless of where you are in the game, there are times where you'll notice the image quality will drop down and the resolution in turn will also drop, and that's there to maintain the performance when you're in more taxing areas. It does mean though that if you're playing on a very large TV, you may actually potentially see some areas that look worse than the original release. They've also culled the level of detail draw distance. Different items and objects in the world tend to pop in a little bit more frequently than I first noticed. As you slow the game down, you can see certain things materializing, but again, it's the trade-off. You either get the good performance, or I should say good in air quotes, you get the adequate performance, or you get the good visuals. And that's not to say the Switch version is a dog's dinner. There are times when the area is less taxing, when the frame rate and the resolution are both high, and it looks really nice. They also increase resolution and generally make the cutscenes look much better than when you're running around in the game. That's a sensible option, and it's an experience that looks lovely when you're playing on the OLED screen of a Switch OLED or even a Switch Lite. When you shrink everything down to that smaller screen, it looks far crisper. Texture quality, well, due to the dynamic resolution scaling, this can suffer a little bit. But again, when we have it side by side with the original, well, I'll let you be the judge. Does it look better? Certainly the Switch version still includes a lot of the shadowing, the dynamic lighting effects, but obviously nowhere near the 60 FPS native resolution you'll find elsewhere. Okay, so overall it is an improvement from the original release. It wasn't bad, but it's much more playable now, and that's absolutely great. Thanks to the awesome people over at Reddit, I can give you some of the other gameplay changes, which there's no way in a month of Sundays I would have been able to dig out on my own. There was an issue in episode 7 where in certain situations Maz would not be present to continue the story mission Friends of the Resistance. That's been fixed. There was an issue in episode 3 where in certain situations the level trigger for the high ground, I'm not sure how fixed that is. It seems to be working for some people and then not for others, but there does seem to be a workaround that you can go to Mustafar space where they've added an entrance. There was an issue in Green Harvest, the free play mission, where under certain criteria the camera would be stuck on Tatooine indefinitely, and they've also implemented 4 new capital ship encounters in local space. This adds 34 additional Kyber bricks to the collection: Fulminatrix, Home One, Invisible Hand and Venator. As far as the install size of the game post-patch, you're looking at 15.8 gigabytes needing to be available on your Switch. Interestingly, I don't know how much that has actually changed from launch. The patch coincides with quite a substantial sale in the US regions, where the deluxe edition of the game is currently at its cheapest ever price. It's 30% off until September the 5th, taking it down to $48.99. But if you're in the UK, you can actually pick up the physical base game for £28. That's 44% off over at amazon.co.uk. Unfortunately, we don't have a sale on any of the versions on the eShop at the moment. And that's it for this revisit. Let me know any other games that you would like to see revisit reviews on. Obviously, it's not scored, but if you go to our review of this game, you'll notice that the visuals and performance section affected the final score. I think it got 89%. You'd easily be looking at 90, 91% now with the way things are. So hopefully that's of some use to you if you're thinking of picking it up. I am working on another one of these videos for Soldiers, a game that released in an interesting state, but a huge patch has come out for that one, so yeah, I've been working on that. But do let me know any other games that you'd like to see revisited on Switch. I'm also working on something that's a secret, but it is absolutely amazing, and you guys are gonna just go crazy for it. I know I did. So yeah, happy days. If you haven't already, check out the video The Resurrection of Baldo, where we went and revisited that game, and we've got our All Patched Up series as well. As always, a big thanks to all of you who enjoy the content and leave comments down below. We do try and give away a free game each and every month to the subscriber most active on the channel. You can also save 10% on any of your eShop vouchers using code SWITCHUP over at switchup.gg, and we get a little kickback from any sales on the website. But thanks to our patrons, you guys are amazing, and obviously we have a Discord as well if you want to check that out. All the links and everything that we talk about that is in the description, as well as the Joy-Cons we use in the video. That's all in the description. You can save some money there. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya!